Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I'm here to talk about my Murders at Karlov Manor pre-release that I attended this past Saturday. The pre-release was your typical pre-release for the most part, but you'll see that there's a little bit something extra here that makes it just a tiny bit more interesting. This is the pre-release kit that you would get for going. There were at least 3 different types of pre-release kits that you can get. This is one of the many kinds, and you'll note that the character Alquist Proft has different things on the different boxes, and so that's going to influence how you crack the case as it speaks, and that's going to be important later, so I'll discuss it later. But the artwork on the boxes are not all the same, and so you get different things depending on what you open. If you open it up inside, you'll notice that the tokens now have these suspect and case solved. So they're little helpers, a little bit more than average because they used to not have anything on them. Then you'll note that some of these counters that are offered here include different effects like stun, flying, poison, and unlock, which I think are all in the set in one way or another. So again, the box is being helpful, not just being a box, and that's nice. And if you look inside, there's some artwork of Teysa Karlov being murdered. So Teysa Karlov is dead. Teysa Karlov artwork being murdered here. Alright, let's take a look at what's inside this box. So you'll note that this box is red and Proft is holding a knife. This is going to be important for the little extra thing that this particular set is doing. Inside you get your usual, you have a spin down life counter. I've been enjoying the new color schemes of the spin down life counters recently. So this is like a black and white or off yellowish color with the set symbol here. You get a index divider with a magnifying glass here instead of the planeswalker symbol. You have your little set pack specifically, which contains your promo. I got a barbed servitor. You also get one of 3 of these commander specific promos, so these cannot be used in the sealed deck, but you do get an extra promo, which is nice. I'm glad that that's there. You get a card to offer you a little bit more counters. This includes a stun +1/+1 unlocked suspected case solved, and on the back you can see that there is a little bit additional options that's offered here. You also have a code for Arena. This will give you 6 packs of Murders at Karlov Manor on Arena once the set is unlocked for Arena, so that's nice. I've already redeemed this, so there's no point in you trying to add that to your account, but in the future if I get any more of these boxes, then I will share those codes and you can redeem it if you want. And here we get the most interesting part. Well, so this is not the most interesting part. This is just how to build a pre-release deck, and this is where it tells you where you can't play Voja, Tomik, or Malik in your decks. But this is just the basic how to build a pre-release deck, and then this is the interesting part. So this is the intriguing interrogation, and you start with this phrase and then you have to follow these instructions, and these are dependent on what deck box you get, what promo you have, and so forth. And so this deck box, as you can see, is a red deck box, and so you check to see if he's holding a knife or rope, and then you follow these instructions, and I'm guessing that it'll tell you what you have to enter into ravnica.detectiveagency.com. I haven't done these yet, but I'm planning to do it in a little bit. But it does matter which card you get, and I guess the Voja and the Malik and Tomik cards actually have alternate options, and so that's interesting. And then you get one of 3 dividers in blue, red, and yellow. And so I got the red and the red, but who knows what you're going to get, and that'll give you what you need to do. So I'll follow up in the comments with what I discover at the end of this. But this is nice. This makes you feel like you're doing something more than just playing a pre-release, and it brings you a little bit more into the setting, and I really appreciate that. Little things like this really matter. And then you had 6 packs of Magic the Gathering, which I opened and got this. And these are play boosters, so I'll discuss briefly what that adds to the set. But the setting is the Karlov Manor, and so somebody dies there, and this has like tie-ins with the board game Clue, or Cluedo, if depending on where you are from. That is a new and different way of exploring Magic the Gathering, so I didn't mind that. I thought that was an interesting choice, and then it did lead to interesting additions to the pre-release experience as well. The play booster merges the draft booster with the set booster that's been going around for a few years now, and it makes the booster pack more expensive because there's obviously more cards and more potential value, but it gives you additional things like art cards. Your clues are also art cards on the back that you can use to put something together. I guess there's a big piece of art that comes together when you put them all together, and then you also get foils or potentially cards that are not in the set and so forth. This makes the booster pack a little bit more unusual than it used to be, but potentially more fun for people who really like cracking packs. I just like playing it limited, and so that didn't really matter to me, but there you go. So that is the play booster. Here are all the playable cards I opened. As you can see, there are very few white cards, and even though one of them is a rare, it's really more of a sideboard card, and so I think that white was immediately out of the picture just due to its shallow card pool. Yes, it did have Buried in the Garden if you combine it with green, and it could have been possible to splash off of red with the Elegant Parlor, but I just didn't think that there was anything in it that was really worth destabilizing my mana base for, and so that was out. You can also see that blue had the most number of cards and the deepest card pool as a result, and red had the second most number of cards. I was curious about black because the Barbed Servitor was my promo rare, and it seemed interesting. And black had a good mix of creatures and removal. I think one of the most strongest rares that I had was actually the Axebane Ferox over here in green. And green had the second shallowest card pool, and so I considered combining them because I did get 3 Golgari cards in the Insidious Roots, Crawl, Whipcracker, and the Richest Scoundrel, but I think even that combined didn't turn out to be quite enough of a build, and my rares in general weren't amazing, and so I wasn't really taken by any of the rares enough to lean into building towards playing those particular rares. And so in the end, what convinced me was the combination of blue and red, specifically because they have deeper card pools. Red has a bit more in terms of removal, and blue has a lot in terms of flyers. And when you combine those, plus the Gadget Technician and the Gleaming Geardrake here, I think there was just enough to make a pretty good deck and not have to worry about some of the chaff that's in both of the colors in this particular card pool. And so the deck that I ended up making was a blue and red deck. And so let's take a look at the deck. Alright, so this is the deck that I built. We have a lot of 3-drops, and we have the Disguised Creatures with the Gadget Technician, the Lumbering Laundry, and the Mistway Spy all potentially becoming 3-drops as well because of the Disguise. So it's a little clogged here, but there is a good amount of synergy, and that's what makes this deck work really well. And so the payoffs are the Crime Novelist and the Gleaming Geardrake, as well as to a lesser extent the Furtive Courier, because they all get a benefit when you sacrifice an artifact, and in the case of our deck, that's going to be clues. So the Furtive Courier can become unblockable when that happens, and the Crime Novelist and the Gleaming Geardrake both grow. And so the idea is that these 3 cards are going to be attempting to finish my opponents off if my flyers in the triple Crime Stopper Sprites and the Coveted Falcon and the Mistway Spy can't get through for the win. And so that is the base goal of the deck, and it's a little bit on the aggressive side. There's a bit of tempo play as well, and so that's how the deck is trying to win. To aid this, there are a ton of non-creature spells, many of which can generate clues. So the Knife is itself a clue. The Curious Inquiry can be suited on any of these flyers to generate clues time and time again. Deduce, Eliminate the Impossible, Out Cold, and even Torch the Witness can all generate clues as well. And so there's a lot of ways to generate clues, which works well with the Geardrake, the Novelist, and the Courier. The Courier also has a loot ability, which will help fuel the Crime Stopper Sprites in giving them the ability to stun my opponent's creatures for a turn. And then we have a bit of removal with Torch, Suspicious Detention, and Dramatic Accusation, trying to deal with my opponent's bigger creatures. Potential additional damage coming from the Knife and the Curious Inquiry, equipped to a proper flyer or a ground creature that can do some work as well to get some additional damage through. And then we have the Vengeful Tracker as a way of punishing my opponent for cracking clues, the Frantic Scapegoat as an early attacker that can eventually give one of my other creatures a bit more evasion in terms of giving them menace. A bit of card refill with the Case of Crimson Pulse and some tempo with an Unauthorized Exit. and Hotshot Investigators bouncing my opponent's creatures. Now, Hotshot Investigators and Laundry are probably the only bulky creatures that I have. So these are going to be doing the hard work and trying to defend my ground if in the late game when my opponent's bigger creatures appear. Unfortunately, they're not the best creatures, and so the hope is to try to win early and then just tempo my opponent out with cards like Out Cold. And then we have 4 lands, the Escape Tunnel, and 9 islands and 7 mountains that you don't see here. So that is the basics of this deck. Alright, so let's talk about the games that I played at Emerald Knights. These pre-releases are 3 matches long, and the prizes are the same no matter what. And so everybody gets 2 packs of the set and a promo card if you play through all 3 of your matches. I like that prize structure because it takes some of the intensity off of people that are playing, and everybody just plays all the way to the end. And so that means that you're never going to get stuck with a buy unless somebody really just didn't care for their prize packs and their promo card. But my first match was up against a Orzhov player. They were playing white and black. And in the first game, I won the die roll, but I had to take a mulligan to 6. It didn't matter because my opponent got mana screwed, and so I just kind of ran over my opponent because I just couldn't play many cards. In the second match, they were on the play, but they took a mulligan to 6, and then the game was actually going fairly well until at one point they just hit a pocket of land and they just flooded out, and so they weren't able to draw as much gas as me, and I had a lot of clue generation at that point, and so I was able to draw a lot more cards and then eventually get in for the win. And so that was the first match, kind of won by the random number god to some extent, although, you know, my clue gathering did help a lot. In the second match, I was up against a Grixis deck, and this one went all the way to 3 games. In the first game, we were doing pretty well at first, and then I had the misfortune of drawing too many lands while my opponent drew a lot more action cards, and so I lost that one. In the second match, I was on the play, and my opponent again took another mulligan. This time I ended up getting there mostly because I got my opponent down to a fairly low life total early, and then it was really tight and I managed to win because I had flyers and they didn't, and that's what got me there. But it was really close at the very end there. And then the final match, we were battling pretty well, and at the very end of that match, we ran out of time basically. It was just a slogfest. And my opponent, I think, had the advantage, so they were probably going to beat me. And if I had drawn a removal card, I think I might have been able to get there as well at the very end to win on the 5th turn of overtime. But I just couldn't draw what I needed, and my opponent wasn't able to finish me off. I was able to stall them just enough to survive, and we got a draw out of that one. My final opponent was playing a Esper deck, and in the first match, I got land screwed early on, and my opponent just happened to have their Detective Lord with a bunch of detectives, and they smashed me so badly that it was brutal. In the second game, I was on the play, and my opponent got mana screwed, and so I took advantage of that, went wide and smashed them. In the third game, my opponent was on the play, and we both took a mulligan to 6. Unfortunately for me this time, my opponent again went nuts with the detectives, really fast and aggressive, and I just couldn't put together much of anything, especially with my opponent gaining life off of their life linking detective early on. And so I lost that one, and my opponent won. That left me with a match total of 1 and 2. Overall, I think that a lot of the games were dependent on randomness, determining, you know, whether by flood or screw. In the case of my opponent just having way better aggressive draws, getting their one of Detective Lord in 2 of the games early out with aggressive detectives really worked well in their favor. And my deck did manage to go off in the first match, so I don't feel like it was the worst deck in the world. It just wasn't able to compete in the third one. And so those were the games that I played. Overall, I felt like the set is pretty interesting. I think that there's a lot going on, and it makes me want to play the draft and see what I can sculpt if I have a little bit more cards to work with. And so I'm looking forward to drafting the set quite a bit. I also, in the end, felt that this was one of the better pre-release experiences. Again, just because it added that tiny little bit of the mystery that you have to solve. and that really fits in with the theme of the set. The set being set on Ravnica I think worked pretty well too, because Ravnica is a large city, and solving mysteries and detective agencies and stuff like that, you kind of feel fits really well with a large city when you think about it. And so I was pretty pleased with my overall experience with this pre-release. I think that it still could be a little better, but again, they threw in an extra promo on top of everything else, and so that made me feel pretty good. For all of my troubles, I got 2 play boosters as well as a promo card, this one being the Dovin's Veto with the treatment here that is old border and foil, and so it's a nice little add-on from the store that we got, and so I had a good time, and I'm looking forward to playing with this set more. Let me know what your experience with pre-release was like in the comments below, and if I can get anywhere with this RavnicaDetectiveAgency.com mystery that needs to be solved, then I will put what I find in the comments below. Anyway, this was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.